The Seattle Aquarium is conducting ongoing research on sea otter foraging habits along Washington's coast. Sea otters need to eat at least 25% of their body weight daily to be healthy. They live in large family groups called rafts, and they hunt for their food along the shoreline in kelp forest areas. In general, the rafts will stay in the same area as long as food is available. Historically, the sea otter's range extended from Japan through the Aleutian Islands, down the Pacific coast of the United States, and into Mexico. As a result of the fur trade, only small pockets of sea otters remained. There were no sea otters on the Washington coast until they were reintroduced in the late 1960s and the early 1970s. A number of organizations started studying sea otter populations in Washington in the 1980s. Those surveys have shown population increases averaging about 8% per year over the last 25 years. As sea otter populations continue to increase in Washington, researchers are now studying sea otters' feeding habits and whether their habitat can sustain them. 8 to 12 times a year, researchers from the Seattle Aquarium gather their equipment and travel to one or more remote sites along Washington's coast to conduct this research. Amy Olson, laboratory specialist, Dr. Sean Larson, curator of conservation research, Caroline Hempstead and Aubrey Tice, animal care specialists, are the scientists from the Seattle Aquarium that conduct the research studies. The team packs binoculars, spotting scopes, recording sheets, and other equipment to observe and document sea otter foraging behaviors.
So we're going to be heading to Sandpoint, which is in the center of the range. So let's make sure we have everything. What do you want first in your pack? What do you usually put at the bottom?
I usually put binoculars at the bottom.
Okay. So here's your binoculars. Get up to good shape. First aid kit.
That's about the same.
And then put your big sheets on here. Okay. We'll put forward and we're good.
Research may be conducted at 26 different sites, divided into the north, central, and south segments of the Olympic Peninsula. The goal is to go out quarterly to each segment and observe sea otters at one or more of those sites. This way, we get a good representation of each segment every quarter. This is Dr. Sean Larson describing the research that's being conducted.
Seattle Aquarium started collecting sea otter foraging data in 2010, and we started collecting foraging data because we were involved in a federal Department of Interior research project on sea otter populations throughout their range. Washington was one of the populations that was being studied, and part of the study was to look at what the sea otters were eating in each of these populations to determine whether or not they're food limited and how stable their populations were and how quickly they might be able to grow. We have about 3,000 foraging dives that we've collected so far, and what it tells us is the preferred prey of the sea otters in different areas throughout the range. So from the northern end in Lea Bay all the way down to the southern end, which is near Claylock and Destruction Island. And these animals eat different things at different places. Sometimes it depends on the habitat. So here at Sandpoint, this is mixed rocky intertidal habitat. And so the otters here are eating primarily crabs, mussels, and clams, because there is some sandy bottom here as well. Whereas in the southern end of the range, where the habitat is mostly sandy, they're eating primarily clams.
The team's research locations are based on where sea otters have been seen in previous studies. Most often, the otters are found in very remote areas of the coast, requiring the team to hike long distances and pack their equipment over rugged terrain to reach the research sites. Occasionally, the team reaches the selected research site only to discover that the otters are not present. They set up their equipment on an elevated position where they can see the sea otters below. Researchers record data for one individual at a time, noting how many foraging dives they do, how long each dive is, if the dive was successful in the otter finding food, and what kind of food the otter is eating. They record dive time, surface time, type of prey, and any specific notes. It can be challenging to keep track of an individual as they dive, return to the surface, and consume their food. One of the most difficult parts of the study is identifying prey items that the otters are eating. If the prey is not clearly visible, the team observes how the otter manipulates their prey. They look for whether the otter is using its paws